Hey guys, thanks for bearing with me today. Sorry that we were having technical difficulties as well. Um, so I'm gonna record a video. It'll be about 15-30 minutes. Sorry. So I'm going to record a video for kids that weren't in class today or that couldn't get in. So last week we talked about slave rebellions. The most famous one in the history of the United States was the Nat Turner Rebellion. We briefly talked about that, answered some questions. We're going to go into more details with that today. Okay. So we're going to use the same Nat Turner reading that we used at the end of last week. The first 5 questions of the Cornell notes are going to be the same 5 questions that was at the end of the Nat Turner reading last week, okay? So give me 1 second. Let me share my screen here. Okay. All right. So I'm going to read this to you guys again, okay? And then we're going to go ahead. We're going to answer the first 5 questions in the Cornell notes. I'm just going to write them, okay? Because we went over those last week, and then we'll do 3 more questions, okay? Okay, Nat Turner Rebellion. Again, I know we read this last week. I'm gonna read it to you guys again, and then we're gonna go over the Cornell notes questions, okay? Okay, the Nat Turner Rebellion. Nat Turner was a slave who led an uprising of about 70 slaves in Virginia in August 1831 that resulted in the death of 55 whites. He was eventually captured, convicted, and hanged. In the aftermath, Virginia executed 56 blacks accused of being part of Turner's slave rebellion. Over 200 African Americans were also beaten and killed by white mobs. The insurrection shocked the South, and many came to believe that the revolt was connected with the rise of abolitionism. Many Southerners never recovered from the fear of another slave insurrection, and new laws were passed that restricted their rights even further. The following are excerpts from the Confessions of Nat Turner, written by Thomas Ruffin Gray, who held several jailhouse conversations with Turner before the trial. I know last week I was trying to show some videos on Hulu, but it wouldn't work. But I remember I was telling you guys about how it is for slaves on a slave ship. Okay, many of them die before they even get to the Americas. All right, but I found a perfect video to describe that finally. So give me a second. Let me turn my sound on. I'll share my computer sound. Bloop. Yeah, let's go here. 1 second. Bam. Okay. I will probably show this again tomorrow during class, just in case you guys don't see this, okay?
A retired police lieutenant. The tragedy in my life was when the local gang member murdered my daughter because I was a police officer. They've been talking recently.
From about 1525 to 1866, 12.5 million Africans were taken from their homeland and forcibly transported across the Atlantic, a journey that approximately 2 million of them would not survive. By the turn of the 18th century, European merchants were building vessels capable of transporting hundreds of enslaved people per journey. These ships had extra portholes for ventilation, weapons mounted on deck in case of rebellion, and additional compartments added below deck to take on more human cargo. Before boarding the ships at African port cities, enslaved people were stripped of their clothing and remaining possessions and had their heads forcibly shaved. During boarding, which could take weeks or even months, enslaved people lived on the deck of the ship in a temporary wooden house constructed by the crew. The crew also installed netting around the deck of the ship, designed to catch those enslaved who might opt for death over forced servitude. Once moved below deck, enslaved people would find themselves stuffed into compartments with ceilings as low as 4.5 feet, where they would spend most of their voyage. They were segregated by gender and age. Adult men were kept separately and shackled in pairs. Women usually left unchained in their designated compartment, and children often free to move about the ship. There were no sanitary facilities of any kind. Enslaved people were forced to relieve themselves where they sat, creating hellish conditions when combined with the heat and lack of ventilation below deck. Disease was rampant. Dysentery, malaria, yellow fever, smallpox, measles, and influenza ravaged the enslaved and crew members alike. The enslaved people generally spent about 8 hours a day above deck, but were still separated by gender, with a barricado, a reinforced wall that could be used to protect crew members in case of a revolt. Enslaved people were also subject to forced exercise, which sometimes included dance and song for the entertainment of the crew. Enslaved captives deemed disobedient were tortured and beaten, usually whipped with the especially cruel cat-o'-nine tails, a tool designed to inflict maximum pain. Enslaved people who refused to eat their typical meal of rice and beans were forced to do so, sometimes with a speculum oris, a medieval tool used to force open a person's mouth. Women, while used...
When we watch Roots this year, everything that they're describing, you will see, okay? Everything that they're describing, you will see.
Usually left unshackled, were raped and sexually abused by members of the crew, sometimes arriving in the New World, carrying the children of their attackers. But it was the women, using their minuscule freedoms, who would often coordinate mutinies against their captors. But these rebellions were rarely successful. The true extent of the horrors of the Middle Passage came to light in a 1783 court trial over the slave ship Zong. The Zong left present-day Ghana in August of 1781 with 442 enslaved on board. After a 2-month journey riddled with navigation errors, 62 enslaved people and 7 crew members had perished without reaching their destination. Disease was spreading throughout the ship, and fresh water was running dangerously low. Captain Luke Collingwood was afraid of the financial cost of more deaths. Enslaved people that died of disease were not covered by the ship's insurance, but the enslaved who drowned were. Collingwood ordered approximately 130 enslaved people thrown overboard. He claimed it was necessary to do so to halt the spread of disease. At the trial between the Zong's owners and their insurance company, the owners argued that because it was legal to kill sick animals for the health of a ship, it was legal to treat enslaved people the same. The court agreed with the ship's owners, but the trial itself exposed the horrors aboard the Zong, and its story was republished by British abolitionists with the name of the ship redacted, meant to show that this tragedy could happen on any ship transporting enslaved people across the Middle Passage. 24 years after the Zong trial, the international slave trade was outlawed in both Great Britain and the United States. It would take England an additional 26 years and the U.S. another 58 years plus a civil war before the practice of slavery was officially abolished.
Terrible. I have chills just even thinking about it. Okay. On the 12th of May, 1828, my birthday. The 12th is my birthday. I was born in 1828. sorry. I heard a loud noise in the heavens, and the Spirit instantly appeared to me and said, the serpent was loosened, and Christ had laid down the yoke he had borne for the sins of men, and that I should take it on and fight against the serpent. For the time was fast approaching when the first should be the last, and the last should be the first. What we're reading here, a writer or a journalist, after Nat Turner was talked, went to his jail cell, and he basically asked them questions about the rebellion, what occurred, so on and so forth. Okay, so these words are Nat Turner's words. Okay, these are Nat Turner's actual words. Will, Jack, Hark, and I quickly agreed we should commence at Mr. Travis's home that night, and until we had armed and equipped ourselves and gathered sufficient force, neither age nor sex was to be spared. We remained until about 2 hours in the night when Hark went to the door with an axe for the purpose of breaking it open. As we knew we were strong enough to murder the family if they were awake by the noise. But reflecting that it might create an alarm in the neighborhood, we determined to enter the house secretly and murder them while sleeping. Okay, so basically, Nat Turner saw a sign, saw a spirit, saw an angel, whatever. Okay, so he thought it was a sign to, it's time for me to free my people. All right, it's time for me to end slavery. Okay. Him and his three buddies went to the first house, and they decided that neither no woman would be spared, no man would be spared, and no child would be spared. Okay? They went into the house. They were confident enough if they caused a commotion, they'd still be strong enough to kill the family if they were awake. But they thought it would be better to sneak in so they don't awake the rest of the neighborhood. Okay? So the plan was to murder them while they were sleeping. Hart got a ladder and set it against the chimney on which I ascended, and hosting a window, entered and came downstairs, unbarred the door, and removed the guns from their places. Armed with the hatchets and accompanied by Will, I entered my master's chamber. It being dark, I could not give a death blow. The hatchet glanced from his head. He sprang from the bed and called his wife. It was his last word. Will laid him dead with a blow of his axe, and Mrs. Travis shared the same fate as she lay in bed. Okay, so Nat Turner, I believe he went to his master's house first. Okay, his buddy got a ladder, he snuck in the window, went down the stairs, opened the door for everybody else, took out all the guns. All right, they had a hatchet or a machete or just a really big knife. Imagine a really big knife, really tiny sword. Okay, like this big maybe. Nah, probably longer and wider. Okay. Accompanied by Will's mat, I entered my master's chamber, it being dark. So he went into a slave master's bedroom. Okay. Because it was dark when he swung the hatchet, kind of grazed his head, missed his head. Okay, which woke him up. He called for his wife, and before he could say anything else, Nat Turner's friend killed Nat Turner's master. Okay. His wife still asleep, killed her too while she was sleeping. The murder of this family, 5 in number, was the work of a moment. Not one of them awoke. There was a little infant sleeping in the cradle that was forgotten until we had left the house and gone some distance when Henry and Will returned and killed it. So they killed 5 people in the house. They were all sleeping. His master woke up for a split second before he was killed. They walked a little bit away, maybe a mile or two, and then they remembered that they didn't kill the baby. So they went back, and then they killed the baby. The murder, read that already. We started from there for Mrs. Reese maintaining the most perfect silence. We're finding the door unlocked. We entered and murdered Mrs. Reese in her bed while sleeping. So they went to the next house, the door unlocked, went into the room, murdered the lady of the house. Her son awoke, but it was only to the sleep of death. From Mrs. Reese, we went to Mrs. Turner's, a mile distant, which we reached about sunrise on Monday morning. Henry, Austin, and Sam found Mr. Pebbles Mr. Peebles, Austin shot him, and the rest of us went to the house. Okay, so they went to the next house. They killed the lady of the house and their son. Okay, then they went to the house after that. By this time, now they're accumulating former slaves. Okay, every house they go to, they're killing white families, and they're accumulating more people, more slaves, more support. Okay, let's see. We reached Sunrise. Henry, Austin, Sam, Mr. People. Austin shot him, and the rest of us went to the house. As we approached, the family discovered us and shut the door. So the next house they're going to, the family sees them coming, and they close the door. Okay. Vain hope. Will, with one stroke of his axe, opened it, and we entered and found Mrs. Turner and Mrs. Newsom in the middle of a room, almost frightened to death. Okay, so when cut the door open, broke the door open with the axe, walk in, they just see the women of the house on the floor. They're probably praying. As we approached, the family discovered us, shut the door, rain hope, our dad already. Will immediately killed Mrs. Turner with one blow of his axe. I took Mrs. Newsom by the hand and with the sword struck her several blows over the head, but not being able to kill her, as the sword was dull. Will, turning around and discovering it, dispatched her also. Okay, so one of Nat Turner's friends killed one of the ladies that was in the middle of the room. Okay, Nat Turner had a really dull sword. It wasn't sharp. So he kept hitting her in the head with the sword, but it wouldn't kill her because it was dull. His friend saw Nat Turner was struggling. One blow to the head, she died. Okay. By this time, my company amounted to 15. So, all right, so 15 now, just wreaking havoc. Okay, 15 former slaves going from house to house, killing white families. All right. As we pushed onto the house, I discovered someone running around the garden, and thinking it was some of the white family, I pursued them, but finding it was a servant girl belonging to the house. I returned to commence the work of death, but by they whom I left had not been idle. All the family were already murdered, but Mrs. Whitehead and her daughter Margaret. So, by the time he followed the servant girl, I think he thought it was a white person, okay? Ended up being another slave. The slave took her to her master's house, but by the time Nat Turner got there, his peoples already got there. They already killed that family, okay? Where are we? Servant girl, Mrs. Whitehead and her daughter Margaret. Okay, as I came around the door, I saw Will pulling Mrs. Whitehead out of the house, and at the step, he nearly severed her head from her body with this broad axe. Okay. I proceeded to Mr. Levi's Waller's, 2 or 3 miles distant. I took my station in the rear, and as it was my object to carry terror and devastation wherever we went, I placed 15 or 20 of the best armed in front, who approached the house as fast as their horses could run and strike terror to the inhabitants. And sometimes got inside in time to see the work of death completed, viewed the mangled bodies as they lay in silent satisfaction, and immediately started in quest of other victims. So, Nat Turner has been a slave all his life, okay, over 30 years old, right? His siblings has probably been taken away. If he had a woman, she may have been raped or murdered. His mom may have been raped or murdered. He gets beaten every day. They don't get fed properly. They have raggedy clothes. Their huts where they live is probably not the best place, okay? They work all day, every day, except for Sunday. Sunday is the only day off, okay? He's tired of slavery, all right? And this is a very religious man. So he sees that one day, a sign comes to him, right? And was like, yo, it's time to free your people, okay? So then he starts killing all these white families, and it says, what does it say he did? I sometimes got strike. I sometimes death completed. Viewed the mangled bodies as they lay in silent satisfaction. So he sees all this death, all these dead bodies, and he's happy about it. In his mind, he thinks all these people deserve it, whether they are male, female, or children. Okay. As I came to the door, I saw. Where am I at? Stay losing my. I sometimes. Okay, having murdered Mrs. Waller and 10 children, we started to Mr. Williams, having killed him and 2 little boys that were there. So they killed 10 children, in one house. Sorry. They killed 10 children in one house. Okay? And then they went to the other house, killed the master of the house and his 2 kids. Having murdered Mrs. Williams, we started for Mr. having killed him and 2 little boys that were there. While engaged in this, Mrs. Williams fled and got some distance from the house, but she was pursued, overtaken, and compelled to get behind one of the company who brought her back. And after showing her the mangled body of her lifeless husband, she was told to get down and lay by his side, where she was shot dead. This lady ran away. Nat Turner's followers caught up to her, brought her back. When she came back, she saw her dead husband's body on the floor. They told her to lay down right next to it, and then they shot her. Our number amounted now to about 60, all mounted and armed with guns, axes, swords, and clubs. On reaching Mr. Parker's gate, I remained on the road with 7 or 8. The other going across the field to the house and half a mile off. Okay. So maybe, let's see what it said. About 60, 700. Okay. So 50 plus of his followers went off to get the rest of the houses. Okay. And he stayed behind. What did it say he stayed behind? With 7 or 8 of his followers. Right. After waiting some time for them, I began to get impatient. Now, the 50 plus followers never came back. I began to get impatient and started to the house for them. And on our return, we were met by a party of white men who had pursued our blood-stained track. The white men, 18 in number, approached us in about 100 yards when one of them fired. I then ordered my men to fire and rush on them. The few remaining stood the ground until we approached within 50 yards. When they fired and retreated, Hark had his horse shot under him, and I caught another for him as it was running by me. 5 or 6 of my men were wounded, and finding myself defeated here, I instantly determined to cross the Nottoway River and collect a sufficient force to proceed back to the old neighborhood, where a man will rejoin me, make new recruits, and come down again. So now he's getting his butt kicked, okay? 5 or 6 of his men are done, okay? I think it's him and maybe 2 other people that are left, okay? He sees that this is not going the way he wants to anymore, so he's going to go back to the old neighborhood to find more people to recruit, okay, to defeat the white soldiers. So by now, I believe he only has 3. It's him and 2 other people, okay? So he went from 3 to 15 to 60, back down to 7 or 8. Now he's down to 3. Him and 2 other people, all right? On my way back, I called at several places, but the white families, having fled, found no more victims to gratify our thirst for blood. I laid down to sleep, but was quickly roused by the alarm that we were about to be attacked. So went back, couldn't find more men to recruit, but he decided, you know what, I'm just going to kill more white families, all right? But everyone cleared the house. By this time, everybody could hear what was going on during the Nat Turner Rebellion. When we watch Roos, they do bring up the Nat Turner Rebellion as well, okay? I don't know why I have scissors in my head. I lay down to sleep, but was quickly roused by the alarm that we were about to be attacked. Pursuing our course back and coming inside of where we had been the day before, we discovered a party of white men at the house. All my men deserted me but 2, right? So it's him and 2 other people. We concealed ourselves in the woods until night when I sent them in search for Henry, Sam, Nelson, and Hart. Okay, so he sent those 2 people to look for his 3 closest followers that were with him in the beginning. I remained hidden until Wednesday evening when I concluded Jacob and Nat had been taken and compelled to betray me. So they never came back. He sent his 2 people to look for his 3 closest followers that started with him at the beginning of the rebellion, but they never came back. So he thought that they got caught and forced to betray him. On this, I gave up all hope for the present, and on Thursday night, after having supplied myself with provision from Mr. Travis's, I scratched a hole under a pile of fence rails in the field where I concealed myself for 6 weeks, never leaving my hiding place, but for a few minutes in the dead of the night to get winter. So this dude was hiding in the cave for 6 weeks. 6 weeks. Okay, he probably had no track of time either. So I know not how long I might have led this life. So I just said, if accident had not betrayed me. A dog in the neighborhood passing by my hiding place one night while I was out was attracted by some meat I had in my cave, barked, on which thinking myself discovered, I immediately left my hiding place and was pursued almost incessantly until I was incessantly until I was taken a fortnight afterwards. Mr. Benjamin Phipps cocked his gun and aimed at me. I requested him to not shoot, and I would give up, upon which he demanded by sword. I delivered it to him, and he brought me to prison. All righty then. Okay. Um, hmm. We did do these questions already last week, huh? Okay. You guys should have these answered already. So what I'm gonna do is, I'm just gonna answer these questions. Okay. You guys should already have it. I'm gonna answer these questions, um, and then I'm gonna give you time to copy them down. All right. Even though we did this last week, I still want you to answer it within these. Okay. Because I'm still grading in the packet. All right. What inspired Nat Turner to lead a slave uprising? It says on May the 12th of May, I'm sorry, on May 12th, 1828, I heard a loud noise in the heavens, and the Spirit instantly appeared to me and said, the serpent was loosened, and Christ had laid down the yoke he had borne for the sins of men, and that I should take it on and fight against the serpent. So what we're going to say is, what inspired Nat Turner to lead slave uprising was a spirit from the heavens said the serpent was loosened serpent was loosened. Why is my, oh, sorry. Serpent was loosened. And he should take the fight against the serpent. The serpent is slavery, okay? How would you characterize Nat Turner and his followers? That is an opinion. I told you the same thing last week. There is no right or wrong answer. It is your opinion. But you can't be way off. You can't just be like, Nat Turner's followers had socks. Nothing way off base like that, okay? But this question is your opinion, okay? Three, what specific events from his rebellion stand out to you and why? This one is another opinion. There's two events that stick out from this rebellion to me. One was when they left the house, realized they didn't kill the baby in the cradle, and then they walked all the way back to kill the baby. Another one is killing 10 kids in the house. I think slavery is the most, disgusting, one of the most disgusting events in the history of the planet. But killing children, that's tough. That's tough, especially a baby. Especially a baby. What the heck? I hate when it does this. Okay. 4. At its height, how many followers did Nat Turner have? Let's see. If we scroll down, let's see. It says 15 here. Hmm. 60 right there. Remember, answer in a complete sentence. What? Oops. Where is it? At its height, Nat at the height of the rebellion, Nat Turner had 60 followers. 5. Was Nat Turner justified in leading a rebellion against his slave owners? Explain. This is also your opinion. Answers may vary. It is your opinion. There's no right or wrong answers. What you think. Do you think Nat Turner was justified in leading a rebellion against slave owners? 6. How long was it after the rebellion before Nat Turner was caught? Let's see. On this, I gave a vote for president. I scratched the hole. I consumed myself for 6 weeks, never leading. Right here. Okay. Oh, President, on Thursday night, after having supplied myself with provisions from Mr. Travis's, I scratched a hole under a pile of fence rails in a field where I concealed myself for 6 weeks. 6 weeks. Let's see. Remember, I got to answer in a complete sentence. Nat Turner was caught 6 weeks after the rebellion. Why was Nat Turner's rebellion a turning point in Southern slave history? If you go to the top, let's see. Many Southerners never recovered from the fear of another slave insurrection. Hold on. Okay, the insurrection shocked the South, and many came to believe that the revolt was connected with the rise of abolitionism. Okay, so white people were starting to think, wow, since the rebellion happened, slavery might go away soon. Many Southerners never recovered from the fear of another slave insurrection, and new laws were passed that restricted their rights even further. So after the rebellion, white people thought that slavery was going to disappear, okay? 2, they were so scared they passed laws that were, they passed harsher punishment, they had harsher laws pertaining to punishment for slaves, right? Yes. There are harsher laws pertaining to punishment for slaves, which restricted their rights even further. Okay, so let's put this in a complete sentence. Where? Nat Turner's rebellion was a turning point for Southern slave history because the South thought the revolt was connected to the rise of abolitionism. Okay. Abolitionism is the end of slavery. Okay. An abolitionist is someone who works to end slavery. All right. So abolishing slavery. Nat Turner's rebellion was a turning point for Southern slave history because the South thought the revolt was connected to the rise of abolitionism. Many many Southerners never recovered from the fear of another slave insurrection, and new laws were passed that restricted their rights even further. Okay, Nat Turner's rebellion was a turning point for Southern slave history because the South thought the revolt was connected to the rise of abolitionism. Many Southerners never recovered from the fear of another slave insurrection, and new laws were passed that restricted their rights even further. Okay, I'm going to give you guys 10 minutes to write this down, okay? It's 5:03. I'll give you guys until 5:13, okay? Ugh. few more minutes, guys. One more minute, guys. Again, thank you for bearing with me. I know my voice is a little raspy. I'm still under the weather, but I will see you guys tomorrow. Okay. Please make sure you answer questions 2 and 3 and 5 on your own. Those are opinion questions. There's no right or wrong answer. It's your opinion. Okay. Your opinion, guys. All right, guys. Have a good rest of your night. Please message me on Dojo if you need anything else, okay? Oh my God. Whew. I thought I wasn't recording for a second. Shoot. I would have cried.